Skywind is one of those Elder Scrolls projects that almost every longtime fan has heard about at some point, but not everyone has followed closely enough to know where it actually stands today. For some players, it is still remembered only as Morrowind and Skyrim. For others, it is one of the most important fan projects in the entire modding community. But the current state of Skywind is more specific than either of those descriptions. In this video, we'll take a practical look at Skywind, what the project is, how it grew out of the Morrowind and TES renewal community, and what changed between the 2024 and 2026 progress updates. From there, we'll look at which departments are now moving into later stages of development versus which bottlenecks still remain. So whether you are a longtime Morrowind fan, a Skyrim player who has only heard the name Skywind in passing, or someone who might even be interested in volunteering for a large-scale Elder Scrolls project, this is a full breakdown of where Skywind stands in 2026 and what the road forward actually looks like. Before we begin, all footage in this video comes from the official Skywind team and their 2026 and 2024 progress updates. I highly recommend watching the full original videos through the links in the description, especially if you want to see the complete department-by-department presentation directly from the developers. Now let's dive in. Skywind is a volunteer-developed total conversion project for the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim Special Edition, with the goal of remaking the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind and Skyrim's game engine. That description is accurate, but it can also make the project sound simpler than what it really is. The team is rebuilding far more than Vvardenfell's exterior world space. Interiors, settlements, dungeons, creatures, equipment, spell effects, dialogue, quests, animations, and more have all been adapted for a game engine that was originally built for Skyrim rather than Morrowind. Morrowind and Skyrim are built around very different design elements. Morrowind's systems include skills, attributes, spellcrafting, travel magic, equipment layering, written directions, and a very different approach to dialogue and progression. Skyrim's engine was not built for all of that by default. Skywind has to rebuild Vvardenfell inside a framework originally designed for Skyrim, while also accounting for Morrowind's mechanics that do not map neatly into Skyrim's game engine. The project began shortly after Skyrim released, when members of the Morrowind community began discussing whether Morrowind could be brought forward into Skyrim's engine. Early Skywind did not immediately exist in the form recognized today. Some contributors saw it as a port of Morrowind into Skyrim, while others wanted a more complete remake with new assets. Public alpha builds were released in 2013, but the team later pulled them from public access after running into a flood of duplicate bug reports, support requests, and ongoing disagreement over how much ported material should remain in the project. By 2016, Skywind had taken a clearer shape as the project we recognize today, a full remake of Morrowind built with modern assets, rather than a project relying mainly on older ported material. There were also major organizational and technical changes during this period. The move from forum-based communication to Discord improved coordination for a volunteer team. Custom skeleton and animation tools made it more practical to create Morrowind creatures that did not simply reuse Skyrim creature behavior. The later move to Skyrim Special Edition gave the project a more stable and modern technical base, but it also required additional adaptation work. By the 2024 update, Skywind had already passed many of its early production stages. At that time, nearly all base game concept art was complete. More than 13,000 custom 3D assets were already in the game. 27 of 30 tile sets were finished. All 3,000 NPC dialogues had been adapted into Skyrim's dialogue system, and 352 of 490 quests were fully implemented. The same update also identified several bottlenecks, including clothing assets, remaining tile sets, asset implementation, sound work, voice mastering, NPC schedules, balancing, and QA. The 2026 update is useful because it shows measurable progress in many of those same areas. The 2D art department is one of the clearest examples. In 2024, the department was reported as 97% complete, with the Redoran interior tile set still remaining. By 2026, that final tile set concept work is complete, along with almost all required 2D work for the base game. The department has therefore shifted mostly toward non-essential extras, loose ends, and expansion-related work. The 3D department has also moved forward. The 2026 update reports that Morrowind's unique Daedric helms are nearly complete, and that the Daedric weapons are also nearly finished, marking the final base weapon set to be modeled for Skywind. Unique Ebonheart set pieces have been finished and implemented, while major creature and NPC assets such as the Kwama Queen and Ascended Sleeper have also progressed. Skywind is now at 28 completed tile sets out of 30, with only the Dunmer Stronghold interiors and exteriors still remaining. Even those are already well underway. Clutter has been finalized, most of the meshes are complete, and testing has begun. Tile sets are especially important because they are the building blocks level designers use to create settlements, interiors, ruins, and other playable spaces. When a tile set is unfinished, any area that depends on it can remain partially blocked until those pieces are ready. Clothing still remains the largest remaining 3D asset category. The latest update places clothing at roughly 75% complete, but also notes that the team is still actively looking for artists with 3D clothing experience. This is a significant production need because clothing affects a large share of the NPC population. In Morrowind, clothing and armor are a part of the social language of the province. Great House affiliation, Imperial administration, temple life, Ashlander identity, wealth, occupation, and local status all depend partly on visual presentation alone. Level design is now in a late but still active stage. Skywind's exterior world is divided into 13 regions. 10 of those 13 regions are between 90% and 100% complete, including Sheogorath and the Grazelands. Work continues in Zarfabel Bay and the Western Ashlands, while Red Mountain is expected to be one of the final exterior regions to be finished. Interior work has also advanced. The update lists 1,256 interior cells, with only 4% still awaiting work and 16% undergoing level design. The remaining cells have moved into later stages such as final review, touch-ups, QA, Navmesh, or optimization. Overall, exterior level design is listed at 86% complete, while finished interiors that have moved into later review stages are at 79% complete. Once level design is finished or stable enough, locations move into Navmesh and optimization. Navmesh is the navigation data that allows NPCs and creatures to move through the world, path around obstacles, and respond properly to the built environment. Poor Navmesh can cause followers, enemies, quest NPCs, and creatures to behave incorrectly, so this step is a part of making the world playable rather than visually complete. In 2026, both interior and exterior Navmesh are reported at roughly 75% completion. Moving on, animation has advanced alongside creature development, which is especially important for Morrowind. Some of Skywind's creatures can use existing Skyrim skeletons, but many of Vardenfell's creatures have body shapes, movement styles, and behaviors that Skyrim was never built to support directly. For those, the team needs custom skeletons, rigs, and animations before they can feel right in-game. In the 2024 update, the team outlined plans for 15 of Morrowind's 44 creatures to receive custom skeletons. By 2026, 14 of those 15 were already in some stage of completion. The department also completed 87 animations in 2024, making it their most productive year so far, and a workflow improvement allowing Blender and Maya to be used more interchangeably has helped production continue. As of 2026, 75% of the animations required for release are complete. Visual effects, or VFX, have shown one of the clearest improvements between the 2024 and 2026 updates. In 2024, roughly half of Skywind's spell effects were complete. Now the team reports that VFX for nearly all spells have been finished, with most already passing final review. They have also checked those effects across first person, third person, and inventory presentation, which matters because a spell effect has to work in several different contexts rather than only looking good from one camera angle. The VFX team has also moved beyond spell work into the environmental systems that shape the look of Vardenfell itself. This update mentions water, custom sky textures, real-world lighting data, and a new weather archetype system. The update also notes that Skywind's lighting and weather systems are built within Skyrim's vanilla engine. without depending on external lighting modifications, such as community shaders. It means the final release should be more compatible with different Skyrim lighting and weather mods, while giving Skywind its own baseline visual identity. Next up, sound design has moved closer to a release-ready state, though the update frames it differently from some of the other departments. Rather than treating every remaining sound task as equally necessary, the sound effects team has identified which tasks are absolute must-haves for release. Once those required sound effects are finished, the department considers itself ready, even if optional or lower priority sounds could still be improved later. For Skywind, sound design is especially important because Vardenfell needs to feel different from Skyrim at the sensory level. A Quama Mine, a coastal settlement, an Ashland region, and a Dunmer stronghold should not all share the same audio identity. Sound effects help separate those spaces even before the player consciously thinks about them. Music has also seen a major change since the 2024 update. At that time, the project already had more than 100 tracks in the game. By 2026, the soundtrack has grown to more than 130 tracks, helped by the addition of new composers. Exploration music appears to be the furthest along, with more than 5 hours finished and only 2 of the 11 exploration categories still in progress. Combat and dungeon music have smaller targets, with the team aiming for roughly 1 hour of combat music and 1.5 hours of dungeon music. Those categories are around halfway complete. Overall, the music department is listed at 73% finished. The music department also has to work around copyright limitations. Skywind cannot directly redistribute Morrowind's original soundtrack, though Skyrim's Dragonborn DLC brought some classic Morrowind exploration tracks into Skyrim, allowing the team to use those specific pieces. For the rest of the score, Skywind's composers are writing new music that follows the tone of the original without simply copying it, giving the remake its own structure for exploration, combat, dungeons, and regional travel across Vardenfell. Asset implementation remains one of the clearest bottlenecks because it is the point where finished assets are actually brought into the game and made functional. A model, texture, sound effect, or gameplay mechanic can be finished by another department and still not be ready for players until it has been brought into the engine, configured correctly, and tested in the build. A previous update describes implementation as the step that merges art, mechanics, and audio into playable, in-game experiences, which is a useful way to think about the department's role. One of the major implementation achievements is the restoration of Morrowind's layered armor structure. The 2024 update described Skywind's version of Morrowind's 14 armor slots, compared with Skyrim's 6, including the return of pauldrons and separate left and right equipment pieces. The 2026 update continues that point by noting that players will be able to equip 2 different gloves, matching one of the original game's more granular equipment features. Morrowind's equipment system is part of how character builds, armor mixing, enchantment planning, and roleplay functioned in the original game, so bringing that structure into Skyrim's engine is a major systems milestone. Luckily, writing is one of the strongest areas of base game completion. The writing team did not simply copy Morrowind's original text into Skyrim's dialogue system. They had to adapt dialogue from Morrowind's topic-based structure into a format that works in Skyrim, while also filling gaps, expanding some existing quests, and creating new material for faction leaders and new features such as smithing. By 2024, all 3,000+ NPC dialogues have been adapted to Skyrim's system, with new random encounters, chats, greetings, and farewells also completed. The previous update also showed us how far quest writing had already progressed. Great House Halalu, Redoran, and Telvanni were done, along with the Mages Guild, Thieves Guild, Imperial Cult, Imperial Legion, Tribunal Temple, and Morag Tong quest lines, with only the Fighters Guild left at that stage. Daedric quests, Vampire quests, and miscellaneous quests were also complete, while all but the final quest of the main quest line were finished in writing. By 2026, the writing department has moved along even further, with all major base game writing complete, and the remaining work focused on item descriptions, book formatting, proofreading, and consistency. The latest update also clarifies the status of Tribunal and Blood Moon DLC. Those expansions are planned as post-release content, which means departments that have completed their base game responsibilities can begin preparing expansion work without holding back the base Skywind release. This is a really smart production choice, because the base game alone already contains an enormous amount of writing, quest content, dialogue, and implementation work. Keeping the expansions post-release helps prevent the project's scope from expanding indefinitely before players ever reach Vardenfell. Voice acting is another large-scale system. Skywind plans to fully voice approximately 3,000 NPCs using real human voice actors with no AI voice acting. By 2026, every base game role has been cast and assigned. Only 3 actors remain on initial recordings, while around 50 are in the retake stage for corrections, such as missing lines, errors, or background noise. The update states that voice acting is expected to be one of the first departments to finish. However, voice mastering remains another major bottleneck, even though voice acting itself is much further along. Once a recording has passed file cutting, it still has to be mixed and mastered so the dialogue sounds clean, balanced, and consistent with the rest of the game. That means reducing background noise, correcting uneven volume, applying processing where needed, and making sure that lines recorded by hundreds of different volunteers do not sound wildly inconsistent when placed beside one another in-game. The scale of the task is enormous. Because Skywind is fully voice-acted, the project has 184,714 individual lines of dialogue that will eventually need processing. Since the last update, the team has shifted toward batch processing for non-major characters and brought in new department leadership to streamline the work. More than 22,000 lines have made it fully through mastering, representing about 12% of the total line count. Next up, quest implementation is also in a late stage. Quest implementation is the creation kit work that makes those quests function in-game. Quest stages, objectives, dialogue conditions, scripts, NPC links, location requirements, journal updates, and the logic that lets the player actually complete the quest. By the 2026 update, the quest pipeline has moved further into testing and polishing. More than 87% of all quests are now complete or undergoing quality assurance testing, with the remaining work focused on debugging, final testing, polish, and quests that still depend on other departments such as level design and Navmesh. A quest can be technically implemented but still not ready for full testing if the location it uses is unfinished, if an NPC cannot path correctly through the space, or if a related script, voice line, or dialogue condition still needs to be adjusted first. Coding supports many of the systems that make Skywind feel closer to Morrowind in structure rather than simply in setting. The 2024 update mentions several systems already in progress or restored, including NPC disposition, levitation, mark and recall, custom spell systems, weapon repair, projectiles, spears, and all 27 Morrowind skills. It also described a hybrid skill and perk approach inspired by Oblivion's perk progression and classic Fallout-style prerequisites, rather than simply adopting Skyrim's Constellation perk trees. The 2026 update builds on that work with more Morrowind-inspired systems. The team has implemented the full NPC class system, allowing characters to use attributes in all 27 skills. They have also added Morrowind-style traps that can be disarmed with probes, continued work on throwing weapons and paralysis effects, and expanded underwater combat so the player can attack with weapons, ranged weapons, and spells in both first and third person. Work has also continued on the user interface, including character creation screens, the level up menu, durability and charge bars in the inventory, and spell crafting. Several coding tasks also remain tied to the road ahead. The 2024 update specifically mentioned NPC schedules for more than 3,000 characters, each needing dynamic routines, and compared that workload to base game Skyrim's smaller NPC population. It also mentioned the need for a broader balancing pass covering dungeon difficulty, loot distribution, and the in-game economy. Localization is also underway. Skywind's voice acting will remain in English, but volunteers are translating in-game text including dialogue, menus, and item descriptions, into multiple languages. The 2026 update states that localization will not delay the base game release, though the goal is to support as many languages as possible at launch. Skywind's media team also plays a practical role in development. Progress updates, videos, social media posts, and documentation keep the project visible, and that visibility helps bring in new contributors. Many of the people working on Skywind today first encountered it as followers of the project. The team is still looking for 3D artists to help with game-ready assets and clothing, dialogue editors for mixing and mastering, programmers for systems such as NPC scheduling and behavior, and QA testers to help identify issues before release. Translators are also useful for localization. The official volunteer page remains the best starting point for anyone interested in applying. Not every role requires the same level of experience. Some departments need specialized knowledge, such as 3D clothing work, sound editing, programming, NIF scope, or creation engine implementation. Other roles, such as QA, file cutting, or some forms of translation, may be more accessible to people willing to learn the tools and follow documentation. In summary, Skywind has advanced across several major departments, including level design, 3D art, animation, quest implementation, and voice acting. At the same time, major work remains in areas such as clothing, voice mastering, programming, localization, and final testing. For Morrowind fans, this makes Skywind a project worth following. It is not an official Bethesda remake and should not replace the original game when discussing Morrowind's design, history, or canon. It is, however, one of the most extensive community efforts to rebuild an older Elder Scrolls title within a newer engine, while retaining many of the systems, locations, factions, and mechanical details that gave Vardenfell its iconic identity. It also provides a useful example of what large-scale Elder Scrolls modding requires in practice. Projects of this size depend on far more than enthusiasm alone. They require artists, implementers, writers, and long-term coordination across many departments. I want to hear what you think. Have you followed Skywind for years? If so, did this update change your sense of where the project stands? If Skywind released tomorrow, where would you go first? Seyda-Neen, Balmora, Red Mountain, or somewhere else entirely? And which returning systems interest you most? If you want more Elder Scrolls coverage focused on lore, quests, mechanics, or major modding projects, consider subscribing. I will be covering more of Skywind, Skyblivion, Beyond Skyrim, and other large-scale projects as we continue looking at the worlds, systems, and histories of Tamriel. As always, thank you for watching, and be sure to check out the official Skywind page for live streams, developer updates, and more. I will see you in Vardenfell, fellow adventurers.